Liverpool in 1847. If I told you that one of the wealthiest ports in the British Empire became a tomb for tens of thousands of people in a single year, would you believe it? This is not a story from the Dark Ages. This is industrial Britain at the height of its power. Beneath the grand warehouses overflowing with silk and gold, thousands of human beings were living in underground cellars so dark they could no longer tell day from night. They called it the Black Hole, not because it was dark, but because anyone who fell into it disappeared. Have you ever wondered how a city built on wealth could swallow its own people? Step into the darkness of 1847, where Liverpool became a machine that consumed the desperate. AI has brought this buried truth back to life. Do you have the courage to face it? In this video, I use modern AI tools to bring historic paintings, engravings, and prints to life, allowing us to shift perspective, change camera angles, and move through the same scenes in ways their original artists never could. First, I want to talk about the docks in early 1847. This view shows the red brick warehouses of Albert Dock stretching along the waterfront under a grey winter sky. Cargo is being unloaded. Silk from India, tobacco from America, cotton bales stacked higher than a man's head. This was wealth. This was power. This was the jewel of the British Empire. By January 1847, Albert Dock was a beast that never slept. Ships arrived from every corner of the globe. The smell of tobacco mixed with salt water and coal smoke. Merchants shouted prices. Money flowed like rivers. But look at Clarence Dock, here. A different kind of ship was arriving. The coffin ships, skeletal figures in ragged clothing, crowd the deck. They are not passengers. They are the remains of a dying nation. By March 1847, ships were arriving faster than Liverpool could contain them. Every day, every hour. The people who survived the crossing stepped ashore carrying death itself. Typhus, dysentery, cholera. More than 300,000 Irish refugees would pour through Liverpool in 1847 alone. The city's lodging houses filled within weeks. Families had nowhere to sleep. And when the surface could hold no more, Liverpool made a brutal decision: push them down. Literally underground, into the Black Hole. This view shows a narrow street in the dockside slums. Stone steps lead down below street level into darkness. A family is descending. Out at more cellar entrances line the street like open mouths, waiting to swallow them whole. By June 1847, Liverpool had run out of room. The solution was brutal. Landlords began renting out cellars. Not homes. Cellars. Storage rooms meant for coal, not human beings. Slippery stone steps led you down. The air grew colder. The light disappeared. At the bottom, you entered hell. No windows. Ceilings so low you had to bend your head. Floors permanently damp. Sewage seeping through the brick walls. The smell hit you like a physical force. Human waste, rotting food, the stench of unwashed bodies, no ventilation, no escape. Families of 10 people crammed into spaces meant for storing coal. Medical officer W.H. Duncan documented what he found. He described cellars where moisture constantly oozed through the walls. But his words were clinical, and they could not capture the horror of living there. What does it feel like when the walls themselves are wet with sewage? When every breath tastes like decay? By autumn, these cellars had become death traps. Remarkably, they were only outlawed in 1848, after tens of thousands had already died. This view shows the interior of a cellar dwelling. Bodies lie packed together on the bare floor. A single candle flickers. The ceiling presses down like a stone lid closing on a coffin. By midsummer 1847, the cellars were no longer shelters. They were pressure cookers of death. 30 people. One room, the size of a small bedroom. Can you picture it? Can you breathe? Every breath you took had already been exhaled by someone else. The air was not oxygen anymore. It was a thick soup of carbon dioxide, ammonia from human waste, rise and gases from rotting matter beneath the floorboards. Many people fainted from lack of oxygen the moment they descended the stairs. The sounds were constant coughing, children crying, rats scratching inside the walls. Above your head, the endless pounding of footsteps from people who had homes, who had air, who had light. In these sealed chambers, people simply stopped breathing. Some died in their sleep, others collapsed, climbing the stairs. And here is the most terrifying detail. In the thick darkness, the living slept beside the dead for hours before anyone noticed. You were not killed by a person, you were killed by the space itself. The city was digesting you. Contemporary newspapers began using a new term, the black hole of Liverpool. By August, the death toll was accelerating every single day. But the cellars were not housing anymore. They were execution chambers. This view shows a street in the Scotland Road district. A cart piled with bodies moves slowly past. Sick people lie on the pavement. Tenement windows show red crosses marked on them. The mark of death. By late summer 1847, 3 diseases struck simultaneously like an army of annihilation. Typhus, spread by lice breeding in the overcrowded filth. Cholera, spread by contaminated water. Dysentery, spread by sewage seeping into everything. The diseases seemed to follow a map. They targeted the cellar districts with surgical precision. Every week, hundreds died. The hospitals were overwhelmed within days. The smell of death hung over entire neighbourhoods. The sounds were groaning, vomiting, the rattle of death in 100 throats at once. Out of carts ran day and night collecting bodies. And here is where it gets worse. Irish refugees were blamed for bringing the disease. They were turned away from hospitals, refused treatment, accused of moral failure. Dr. Duncan's reports from August 1847 are shocking. He described multiple families sharing single rooms, no clean water, no sanitation, no medical care. He begged the authorities to act. They did nothing. By September, the death rate in the cellar districts was higher than any battlefield in Europe. Can you believe it? One of the wealthiest cities in the world chose to let people die rather than spend money to save them. This view shows St. Mary's Cemetery in autumn. Workers are digging an enormous pit. Carts line up, waiting to unload their cargo. Not goods. Bodies. By October 1847, when Liverpool's burial system had completely collapsed, coffin makers could not keep pace with death itself, so they invented a solution. Coffins with removable bottoms. Lower the body into the grave. Open the bottom. Let the corpse fall, pull the empty coffin back up, use it again. At St. Mary's and other cemeteries, individual burials became impossible. Workers dug vast pits. Hundreds of bodies were stacked inside like defective cargo. No headstones, no names, no prayers, just bodies and earth. Historical records suggest more than 50,000 people died in Liverpool during 1847. Most were Irish refugees. Most were buried in mass graves. They stepped off ships believing Liverpool would save them. Instead, Liverpool erased them from existence. What does it feel like when a person has lived and loved, yet leaves this world without even a name carved on a gravestone? Remarkably, you can still visit St. Mary's Cemetery today. Beneath the grass are layers of mass graves from 1847. The ground simply swallowed them whole. This view shows Liverpool Town Hall in late 1847. Well-dressed officials are entering the building. A crowd of poor residents stands behind barriers. The grand architecture gleams in weak sunlight. Power, wealth, indifference. By November 1847, detailed medical reports sat on the desks of Liverpool's officials and London's Parliament. Dr. W.H. Duncan had documented everything. The reports made specific recommendations. Improve sanitation, outlaw cellar dwellings, provide clean water. These were not expensive solutions, they were simple, achievable, life-saving. the response was silence. Official minutes show that the primary concern was cost, not human life. Cost. The problem was described as temporary. The poor were blamed for their own suffering. Meanwhile, outside those council chambers, people were dying by the hundreds. What do you think of a society where those in power choose to look away because saving lives brings no profit? By early 1848, when the death toll had shocked even the hardest hearts, reforms were finally introduced, but they came only after tens of thousands had died. Today, Liverpool Town Hall still stands. Inside are portraits of the very officials who presided over this catastrophe. This view shows a courtyard in the slum districts. An open sewer runs down the middle of the street. Women are drawing water from a communal pump just feet from the flowing sewage. By 1847, the Liverpool had grown too fast. The city exploded from 82,000 people in 1801 to more than 250,000 by 1841. Then the refugee crisis added hundreds of thousands more in a single year. The sewer system could not cope. Human waste flowed directly into the same water sources people used for drinking and cooking. Imagine drawing water for your children knowing it comes from the same source as raw sewage. You have no choice. You watch your children drink poison because there is no alternative. Engineering reports from 1847 show that officials knew the water was contaminated. They knew the connection between sewage and disease. They knew that clean water would save lives. They chose to do nothing until the bodies piled so high they could no longer ignore them. By 1848, Liverpool finally began building modern sewers. Today, Liverpool has one of the most advanced water systems in Britain. But that system was literally built on top of the graves of those who died from its absence. This view shows a winter street. Snow covers bodies that lie where they fell. Refugees huddle in doorways, wrapped in rags. Smoke rises from chimneys of homes they will never enter. By December 1847, winter arrived like a final executioner. The cellar dwellings became ice-cold coffins. People froze to death in spaces where condensation turned to ice on the walls. Weakened by hunger, sickened by disease. Thousands more died as winter deepened. Starvation, disease, exposure. Anyone could kill you. Together, they were unstoppable. Contemporary estimates suggest that January 1848 had the highest mortality rate of the entire crisis. Entire families disappeared from the records within weeks. By February 1848, the worst was finally over. Not because help arrived, but because so many had already died. This view shows construction work in 1848. Workers are demolishing cellar dwellings, filling them with rubble. New sewer pipes are being laid beneath the streets. By 1848, the catastrophe had finally forced action. The Liverpool Sanitary Act was rushed through Parliament. Cellar dwellings were officially outlawed. Workers filled the cellars with rubble, burying the evidence. New sewer systems were installed, clean water pipes were laid. The reforms proved something terrifying. The catastrophe had been preventable all along. Everything done in 1848 could have been done in 1846. The technology existed, the knowledge existed, only the will had been missing. Dr. W.H. Sir Duncan became Britain's first medical officer of health. But these reforms came at a terrible price. They were built on mass graves. They were paid for with tens of thousands of lives that could have been saved. The black hole of Liverpool was eventually buried, not just the cellars themselves, but the memory of what happened there. For decades, this catastrophe was barely mentioned in official histories. But the past is closer than you think. When you walk the streets of modern Liverpool, you are walking above mass graves. Beneath the coffee shops and apartment buildings, tens of thousands of bodies still lie in unmarked graves, stacked in absolute silence. The AI reconstructions you have seen in this video bring back something of what was lost. We can shift angles, move through scenes, see details the original artists captured, but could not show from multiple perspectives. Technology lets us witness what was deliberately forgotten. But technology alone is not enough. What matters is empathy, the willingness to remember those who died without names, without graves, without justice. Liverpool. 1847 asks us a question that remains urgent today. When society chooses profit over people, when authorities choose inaction despite knowing the cost, what responsibility do we bear? In today's world, do you truly believe that black holes like this have disappeared, or have they simply learned to hide? If there is another city, another moment, another scene from history you would like me to reconstruct and explore, let me know in the comments. I read everyone, and your suggestions shape what we explore next. Again, thank you so much.